Karen Steele, A Day of Infamy, Analyzing FDR's Speech. Yesterday, December the 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Franklin D. Roosevelt. President Roosevelt delivered this opening to a speech he gave one day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was delivered to Congress and over the radio for the public. Can you imagine how impressive this speech must have been to persuade Congress to declare war within 1 hour of hearing it? Also, many young men joined in the armed services the very next day upon hearing this speech on the radio. What makes this speech one that is remembered, and why does it matter? The first thing that comes to mind when I think of this speech is the famous line, "The Day of Infamy," and the President speaking the date so that we would never forget. I also remember this speech from the 2001 movie of Pearl Harbor and Ben Affleck. The speech impressed me even with an actor portraying the part of Franklin Roosevelt. Day of Infamy was actually supposed to read a day in world history. I don't think this speech would have been as remembered if those words had stayed in the speech. This tells me that the President chose his words carefully and words that would portray exactly what had happened the day before and that he had to persuade many people to go to war. The President had effective speaking methods that helped to make this speech successful. First, he let his emotions come out in this speech. His tone was authoritative, and by looking at photographs of him when he spoke, he was always looking at his audience. His audience, in turn, kept their eyes on him. FDR was interrupted several times during this brief speech by applause. This tells us that he was very persuasive and the audience was very receptive to what he was saying. Stephen Lucas states that eye contact helps us gauge truthfulness, intelligence, attitudes, and feelings. I feel the President showed all these things, and this made his speech successful. Another thing about this speech shared by Prologue magazine is that the President dictated this speech to his secretary, Grace Tully. She later said the President told her that it would be brief, and this speech was very brief. It was only a little over 500 words long, and it only lasted a little over 6 minutes. The careful word choice and corrections, the President's emotions, and the delivery helped to make this speech so receptive to the audience. Another notable thing the President did for this speech to make it more dramatic is that he stood unaided for the delivery. The President had not walked in several years, but for this important event, he stood proud and delivered this speech to Congress. Eye contact, his strong speaking voice, emotions are speaking techniques that I would like to improve on and use in future speaking assignments. This speech, although brief, is remembered by the first line or the Day of Infamy quote. The summary of the events, the speech being brief, and the President's delivery of it, and how he persuaded everyone from Congress to the American people that an act of war was necessary, are what make this speech so special. December the 7th, 1941, A Day of Infamy, is a part of American history that World War II veterans and many Americans still remember to this day.